Since the fall of Soviet communism 15 years ago, Russia has been a country in social and political upheaval, with entire generations of Russian people often struggling to come to terms with new freedoms, new responsibilities, and a new and growing culture of religious tolerance. Under the old regime, no Christians were allowed to hold any government position. General Boris Shushkov and Gennady Starovarov were once Communist Party members and hardline atheists.
I've been working in the Russian penal system for 26 years. Since I was raised in the Soviet Union, I was very devoted to all the principles of the Communist Party. So I was an atheist, even though my mother and grandmother were Orthodox believers. They truly believed in God.
What really made a difference in my life and my understanding is when I saw how the prisoners who came to Christ changed their own lives. In the way they lived, in their attitudes, they became so different. They were no longer a danger to society. We could all see it so clearly.
The changes these two men saw in the prisoners helped to transform their own lives. So they left their positions in prison administration to establish Prison Fellowship Russia.
Working for so many years in this penal system, I couldn't help but see all the needs. I had no choice. I had to go back. I committed my whole life to that, without even having to think about it.
I think that with God's help, the situation and the environment in prisons in Russia has been significantly changed for the better.
There are more than 10,000 prisons and detention centers in Russia, with over 830,000 people serving sentences. The numbers are huge. But before the work of Prison Fellowship Russia began, there were over 1 million prisoners.
The prisons are a mission field, but we must say a field that needs a lot more care and a lot more resources.
Before 1994, the doors of every prison and penal colony in Russia were closed to all denominations of churches. But in a very short period of time, the situation has changed drastically. Right now, we have either temples or prayer rooms in every prison and in every colony. Our first priority is to help the different Christian confessions and denominations in Russia to get into the prisons and help bring prisoners back to normal life.
In 1990, 7 ex-prisoners founded a Baptist church here in Moscow. Losinka Baptist Church now has over 150 members, most of them ex-prisoners or prison officers. Pastor Sergei Danilenko now leads the church. He was one of those first ex-prisoners.
I was in a prison in the deep south of Russia. There were no Bibles in the prisons, there were no believers. And no believers from outside were allowed to come in and preach to us. I was 23 years old. Then one day I asked myself, why am I in this world?
It was in a solitary punishment cell that Sergei fell to his knees.
I was overwhelmed by a great desire to turn towards the Lord. The Lord convicted me, and there on my knees I asked His forgiveness.
It's only in recent years that Prison Fellowship Russia have even been allowed into the prisons. However, they're already seeing the results in lives that have not only been transformed, but also then dedicated to taking the love of God to other prisoners. One of those men was Slava Koslov.
Altogether, I had 5 sentences. I spent a total of 12.5 years in prison. My life was full of lawlessness and crime. That's why I lost my wife and child, who stayed here in Moscow when I was sent away. I felt like I was a nobody. I didn't exist anymore. It was a terrible state of mind to be around so many people and yet feeling so lonely. So, at the very moment when my life was completely without hope, there was a guy who came around. He came to me and gave me a blue tract and told me that God loved me. As soon as I began reading those words, I began to feel better. There was this supernatural light and warmth coming from the pages of the scriptures.
On his release, Slava came to the Baptist church, whose members had visited and encouraged him in prison. He soon became involved in their plan to create a halfway house.
Many people, when they are released from prison, have no place to go. They don't even have family. So the brothers from this church decided to start this rehab center to help those believers released from prison to adjust to normal life.
The House of Revival became a reality in 2000. As new men arrive, others move on. With the support of Prison Fellowship, many of the earlier brothers have found their feet and now have jobs and families of their own here in Moscow. At just 22 years old, Alexander Komarov is the youngest of the House of Revival brothers, and also the newest.
I spent 5 years in prison, and I was released 2 weeks ago. You know, it's cool. The first time I came here, I didn't really trust people. Now I see that God really changes people's lives and hearts. I first thought it was more like a theater performance, but now I can see that it's real life.
People come to this center with different personalities and different characters, but all of them can see and sense God's love.
Assistant pastor Sergei Molodkov once spent 2 years on the run from authorities after escaping prison. But he says it was only after he was recaptured that he discovered real freedom. He became a Christian whilst behind bars. Now he's helped spearhead a remarkable mission called the Expedition, a traveling program that aims to visit every prison across Russia.
The expedition, taking the gospel to all the prisons of Russia, it was something very special. It was a real-life expression of God's love and mercy to prisoners in Russia.
I was at the very starting point of this expedition. I think that this was a unique event in the world. The scale was immense. Just think about Russia, how huge it is. It covers 12 time zones. There are around 1,000 different prison departments and about 850,000 prisoners. Just think about what it takes to attend every prison and then share the gospel with every prisoner, give them the Bible and share the light of Christ with them. It's a lot. It's a huge work.
The expedition took a total of 8 months and covered over 80,000 kilometers.
It's in the most challenging and difficult areas of our lives that grace is abundant. Prison is a place where they're sending people who have lost any kind of hope for the future. So this is a ministry where God shows lots of grace.